And how are you guys and gals? What would you do if you have a normal life as a high school student and one day your relationship with your best friend suddenly ends due to misunderstandings between both of you? In addition to this, there's the fact that you will be transferring to a new school, so you are left without the opportunity to tell him how you really felt about him. Although to your good fortune, sometime later, destiny makes you cross paths again, but now everything is not the same as it was before. Well, that's kind of what Haru, the anime in this video, is about. The story begins with our protagonist named Futaba Yoshioka, who is a high school teenager and has a total disdain for men. This is because she considers them to be noisy and insensitive beings. Despite this intense hate for men, there is one boy whom she doesn't feel the same way about, and that is Tanaka Kou, a boy she sees as different from the rest. She views him almost as if he were a girl, due to his slender build and soft voice. On one of the following days, while Futaba and her friends were heading home, they encountered a group of boys from their school who were gathered in a park, ready to play cops and robbers. One of the girls suggests that the boys let them join in to make the game more fun. After deciding on the roles, the game begins. Futaba is assigned to be one of the robbers, just like Kou. Without planning it, they both end up in the same hiding spot. Here we can see how much Futaba likes Kou as she begins to think many things about his body and personality. She becomes nervous having him so close and even believes that he can read her mind. Unfortunately for both of them, the boys end up getting caught by the cops. Kou for wanting to protect Futaba, and she for trying to save him. Now they are both in a small circle that simulates a jail, so being so close they have no choice but to talk and interact. In the days that follow at school, these two exchange glances everywhere and at all hours, feeling nervous and blushing every time it happens. Adding more drama to the situation, one afternoon as Futaba was heading home, it suddenly started to rain. She rushes to find shelter from the rain and ends up in a small temple. To her surprise, Kou is also there, as it seems he experienced the same rain shower. They continue to exchange glances and manage to have a conversation, which ends in a romantic gesture. Before leaving, Kou gives Futaba his sports jacket to help dry her head from the rain, and she can't help but think how sweet this gesture is. The next day, Futaba returns his jacket to Kou in a bag, as she'd had taken care to wash it thoroughly. He accepts it and invites her to go to the park on the day of the festival. This leaves Futaba undecided about how to respond to this request. Before she can give a direct answer, another student from their grade interrupts them. This causes Kou to leave without waiting for her response, while she is bothered by this strange student who follows her and keeps asking what she and Kou were talking about. Frustrated, our protagonist finally shouts at him, saying he's being very annoying, and then confesses in front of several boys that this is why she hates men with all her heart. To her misfortune, Kou was there and heard this confession perfectly. With his gaze on the ground, he understood that this applies to all men, including him, so he walked away slightly disappointed. Futaba watches him go, thinking that maybe Kou knows he's the exception to the confession she just made, although she knows he doesn't actually realize it. Several days later, we see the protagonist at home seriously contemplating whether or not to go to the place where Kou had asked to meet her on this day. She is unsure if he's angry with her due to her confession about men. After some thought, she decides to change and make herself look nice for their anticipated date. Upon arriving at the meeting place, which is in Senkaku Park near the clock, she waits for Kou for over an hour. When he doesn't show up, she begins to think that maybe he won't come, recalling the expression on his face when he heard her remarks about men. She becomes sad and decides to give up on Kou. After this event, several days pass, during which Futaba enjoys her summer vacation, but all she can do is think about Kou, while there is no news of him. Once the vacation is over, all the students return to school. Futaba looks around hoping to find Kou, but she can't spot him anywhere. She decides to stop trying, and at that moment, she overhears a conversation between two other students who are talking about how Kou transferred to another school during the holidays. Clearly, this news leaves our protagonist with a broken heart. Later that same day, as she is heading home, the day becomes cloudy and it starts to rain. She decides to go to the same temple where she and Kou first talked. She looks around hoping to find him, but now she realizes he's gone. This causes her to cry deeply as she couldn't muster the courage to reveal her feelings to him. Here we are presented with a rather extensive flashback that reminds us of all the interaction scenes between the protagonist and Kou. We see how they went through everything, from their first encounter to the time when Futaba was abandoned in the park by him, leaving her alone and sad. Returning to the present, 3 years have passed since all these events, and now back with our protagonist, we see her waking up late for high school. After snapping back to reality, she quickly dresses and rushes to her new school. While running to school, she comes across the temple where she and Kou first talked. However, after gazing at it for a moment, she stops attaching importance to it and focuses on getting to class as quickly as possible. Once in class, we can see that Futaba has changed radically. She has stopped being the feminine and delicate girl she used to be and has become more disheveled and less feminine. According to her, this change is for the better, as it means men won't bother her as much. After introducing us to this new Futaba, we now meet her two new friends, Asumi and Chi. On one hand, there's Chi, who, despite being friends with Futaba, believes that she should change and become a bit more organized and feminine. On the other hand, there's Asumi, who accepts Futaba as she is. The only thing these two have in common is that they both envy Makita Yuri. They consider her to be intentionally different, wearing different cute clothes and being shy and quiet, which captures the attention of all the boys in the class. What's funny is that while the girls describe Yuri, Futaba somehow feels identified because she used to be like that 3 years ago. For this reason, she preferred to change her personality in the present. After a few hours during the break, Futaba and her friends chat while walking, although she's more focused on eating than talking. Because she's distracted, she accidentally bumps into a boy who manages to grab the bread she was eating. He hands it back to her and comments that it's an unattractive piece of bread, implying that she should quit overeating. These words, along with the boy's voice, make Futaba momentarily freeze as she watches him leave. For a moment, she is reminded of Kou, because he resembles him in every aspect: his height, his voice, his build, and even his way of walking. For this reason, Futaba tells her friends to go ahead while she runs as fast as she can to find this boy. Once she finds him, she decides to approach him to learn his full name. However, at that moment, another boy appears and calls him by his name, which is Mabuchi. This leaves our protagonist thoughtful because she was sure this boy was Kou Tanaka. After a few seconds, she tells herself that maybe she was mistaken and decides to let it go. On the train ride home, our protagonist can't help but think that Mabuchi is actually Tanaka because he wears the same color sneakers as Tanaka and smiles in the same way. When she gets off the train, Futaba walks in the direction of her home and encounters Mabuchi. He notices that someone is following him and turns around to see who it is. That's when they make eye contact again, and Futaba gets nervous, thinking that the boy might believe she's following him. They both continue on their way, and Futaba notices that Mabuchi is heading to the temple where she first talked to Tanaka. She decides to follow him to confirm her suspicions. At the place, she directly asks the boy if he is Kou Tanaka, to which he answers affirmatively, but mentions that he now goes by Kou Mabuchi because he changed his name due to his parents. The boy finds it amusing that Futaba didn't notice this, considering that they've been attending the same high school for 3 years, and only now she learns that her first love has been close to her all this time. In addition to this, Mabuchi mentions that he has always recognized her despite her change from a quiet personality to a more wild one. This leads our protagonist to start arguing with him over everything he said, and to calm her down, the boy offers her a sincere hug. Futaba is surprised to hear this and quickly backs away from him, which prompts Mabuchi to bring up that she doesn't like men at all. Due to this, our protagonist confesses everything to him, admitting that yes, she hates all men, but she also tells him that he was the exception, confessing that she has always been in love with him. This prompts Mabuchi to also confess his feelings for her, saying that he has always been in love with her since they were kids and that he would love to go back to those times. However, since there's no time machine in this anime, he tells her that the only thing to do now is to forget the past and move on with their lives because everything has changed, and they've both changed, and they are no longer the same as before. After saying all this, Mabuchi says goodbye to the girl, patting her on the head, while she just stands there, thinking about everything that has just happened. Days later, Futaba is in her room feeling because despite finding her first love again, she knows that the boy doesn't reciprocate her feelings. She starts hitting her stuffed animal because of this. After a few days, we see our protagonist in the school cafeteria holding some bread, planning to buy and eat it. When it's her turn in line, she informs the cashier that she won't be needing it bagged, so she pays and leaves without one. However, things don't go smoothly as another cashier notices that the girl is leaving with the bread without a bag and thinks she's... This leads to an embarrassing situation for Futaba as she starts arguing with the cashier. At that moment, Mabuchi arrives to save the day, telling the cashier that he will pay for Futaba's bread. Although everything is eventually cleared up because the other cashier confirms that Futaba did pay for the bread, Mabuchi is not satisfied. He asks the cashier who caused the commotion to publicly apologize to Futaba and calls her an old lady. After some half-hearted apologies, our protagonist follows Mabuchi to thank him for what he did. He tells her it's not necessary and asks her not to call him Tanaka anymore because he is no longer that boy. Now he's a colder, more direct, and almost insensitive person. These words finally make Futaba realize that Tanaka no longer exists. We have another flashback where we see the day when Futaba and now Mabuchi were playing cops and robbers. She laments not being able to talk more that day, missing those times, and wishing to go back to the past. Back in the present, we see the protagonist having lunch in the cafeteria with her friends. They start teasing and laughing at Futaba about the incident with the old lady accusing her. Our protagonist tells them it's not funny and that they should have helped her that day. The girls reply that they didn't do anything because they weren't there at the scene, showing indifference. This reminds Futaba of something Mabuchi had told her earlier, that her friends don't really care about her at all. After this, we see a boy calling Futaba to pick up copies and notes for the students. She accepts because she's in charge of her class, but before leaving, she asks her friends to accompany her. They only wish her luck, so our protagonist has to go alone. Futaba heads to the teacher's room to pick up the notes, but on the way, she encounters Yumi, who is having lunch alone in the courtyard. As they approach each other, Futaba and Yuri have a long girl-to-girl conversation, managing to understand each other and the chat ends with a gift from both. Yumi gives Futaba a keychain, and Futaba gives her a face warmer since it's cold outside. Afterward, Futaba finally manages to reach the teacher's room, but before entering, she has an encounter with Mabuchi, who treats her poorly. In response, she sticks out her tongue at him and enters the teacher's room in annoyance. Futaba collects all the notes, and although they are heavy for her to carry alone, she manages to take them to the door. But when she opens it, she encounters Mabuchi again, who informs her that her friends are just superficial friends since they didn't even bother to come and help her. Because of this, Futaba asks the boy for help, but he refuses and leaves. Fortunately, another boy, a friend of Mabuchi, decides to help our protagonist. This boy's name is Kou Tanaka, Mabuchi's older brother and an English teacher at the high school. While both of them carry the notes to her classroom, Futaba can't help but think about how much Yuchi resembles Mabuchi. After a while, Yuchi separates from the girl and hands her the notes he was carrying, leaving everything in our protagonist's hands. Upon entering her classroom, Futaba leaves the notes in their place and notices her friends, who are having a conversation about makeup. This, coupled with the fact that when she entered the classroom, they didn't pay much attention to her, makes Futaba realize that her friends aren't really her friends. However, she decides not to dwell on it and prefers to have fake friends than no friends at all. So she sits down next to them and tries to join the conversation. However, the conversation isn't pleasant for Futaba because her friends keep criticizing Yuri. This leads our protagonist to confront them and tell them the truth to their faces, calling them jealous and envious. This outburst of honest words makes Futaba, after reflecting on what she just said, try to alleviate everything by saying it was a joke. But just then, Yuri arrives and also confronts these two jealous girls. As a result of all this, Futaba's two friends decide to leave her alone. So now our protagonist has no friends. However, something good comes out of this. Futaba now has a new opportunity to be the way she used to be and stop pretending to be something she's not. After this, Futaba goes to a hiding spot in the schoolyard to think about how to move forward in her life, as she has just lost her only two friends. Suddenly, she's surprised to find Mabuchi at the window next to her hiding spot. She takes advantage of this moment of solitude between them to thank him for all the honesty he showed when she was lost in her way of thinking. She ends up crying excessively, and Mabuchi, to calm her down, gives her a hug. This gesture makes Futaba feel more comfortable with Mabuchi, and it also reminds her of when they were both kids. After this scene, Mabuchi leaves the place saying goodbye to Futaba, who also says goodbye but doesn't know what name to call him. Mabuchi tells her to call him whenever she wants because he doesn't care how she addresses him. Our protagonist decides to call him Tanaka because if she calls him Mabuchi, it would feel like the old Kou Tanaka no longer exists. As the days go by, Futaba continues to think about everything that happened with her friends and with her new but old self. So by the end of the semester, she decides to tell Asumi and Chi the whole truth. Futaba confesses that everything she said on that day they argue was true, because that's how she feels. Still, she apologizes for saying it in such a harsh way. Asumi understands our protagonist perfectly and accepts her apology, but then tells her that if that's really how she feels, she'd rather have nothing to do with her because they come from different worlds, and she doesn't want someone like Futaba in her social circle. After this, she leaves without further ado, and Chi follows her like her faithful companion. Following this, Yuri arrives, wanting to talk to our protagonist, who, after having a long philosophical conversation with herself, listens attentively to Yuri, who wants to be friends with Futaba. Our protagonist accepts without hesitation. After a few seconds, Futaba feels the urge to see Mabuchi, accepting that she now wants to see the person who is now Kao Mabuchi, not the old Kou Tanaka. After searching for a while, she finally manages to find him. Once our protagonist finds Mabuchi, they both start discussing how they feel when they are near each other. However, Yuchi appears and interrupts them, notifying his brother that he will be coming to their house for dinner today. Futaba had no idea that Yuchi was Mabuchi's brother, so she thinks that they are a couple, but this misunderstanding is soon clarified. Yuchi and Futaba begin to chat and get to know each other a bit better, but Mabuchi becomes jealous and invents a rumor that his brother, who, as we remember, is a teacher at the school, is trying something with Futaba. This causes all the students to stare at him, giving Mabuchi the opportunity to take Futaba's hand and lead her away. As a result, these two end up walking hand in hand through the city, and as it is only right, they start talking and trying to resolve past issues. In this way, they manage to clear up the misunderstanding about the date when Futaba waited for him at the Sankaku Park clock during the festival. After this, they both hug each other and Futaba cries, finally understanding why Mabuchi didn't come to see her that day. Later, we see both of them walking home, but before parting ways, Futaba reminds Mabuchi that he has dinner plans with his brother tonight, to which he responds in surprise that she's right and that he seems to have forgotten. At nightfall, Mabuchi's brother is waiting for him to have dinner together, but it appears that he won't arrive as he's outside near a river, contemplating his life while drinking something. Days pass, and it's back to school. We see that all the students have been reassigned to new classrooms, so our protagonist now shares the same classroom with Yuri and Kou, among other students. There's a straight-haired girl who seems quite cold. And then there's a blonde boy, who is a bit nervous but happy in his demeanor. These two seem to have a special and somewhat strange relationship, so let's describe them. The first one is Shuko Murao, a girl with a serious appearance who is a bit antisocial. However, the reality is that she's just a straightforward and reserved girl who also harbors a small secret about a forbidden romance. And the second is Aya Kominato, a cheerful boy who tends to be noisy and easy to dislike. He's always seeking attention from Murao because it seems he's hopelessly in love with her. After these introductions, we now see the teacher informing everyone that class representatives will be elected today. The teacher asks if anyone wants to be a representative, but as no one raises their hand, our protagonist decides to do so, becoming the class representative. She goes to the front of the class and, as her first decree, decides to choose another representative, but this one must be a male. Again, no one volunteers, but Mabuchi raises his hand, becoming the second representative of the class. We also see that Aya wanted to raise his hand, but his shyness prevented him from doing so. In this way, we now have the two representatives chosen, but the teacher informs them that they still need 3 more representatives who will be in charge of school events. This election doesn't take long, as Yuri, Murao, and Kominato are the only ones who volunteer. This completes the representatives for our protagonist's class. Before taking on their roles, the teacher informs these 5 that they will first have to attend a leadership training camp, which is supervised by Mabuchi's brother, Yuchi. The next day, Futaba heads to Mabuchi's house to pick him up and go together to the training camp. When she arrives and knocks on the door, she's surprised to see the boy shirtless, which makes her nervous. Seconds later, the boy lets Futaba in, and while she waits for him to change and get ready, she waits for him. But as she's not very patient, she goes to his room to look at his things, imagining lovely scenarios, thus forgetting about the real world and also forgetting her backpack. Now we see these two heading to the train station to catch the train that will take them to the camp location. However, just before boarding the train, our protagonist realizes she left her backpack at Mabuchi's house, so they both hurry to retrieve it. Once they find the backpack, they sprint as fast as they can to catch the train, and they make it, but it doesn't go entirely smoothly. The train they boarded doesn't take them to the camp, but goes directly to the school instead. So both have to wait for the train to finish its route so they can get off and catch the correct one. Once they finally board the correct train and arrive at the camp, they offer sincere apologies to their teacher for the misunderstanding, which he accepts, and he asks them to change and go to have lunch. In the camp cafeteria, we see the 5 representatives having lunch, and suddenly, Yuchi arrives unexpectedly to inform Mabuchi and Futaba that because they arrived late, they have to write an apology letter and submit it to the teacher. Once Yuchi leaves, Mabuchi starts saying that he won't write that letter because it seems, which angers Murao because he's being rude and disrespectful to his brother. This leads to an argument between the two of them. Kominato then intervenes because he finds it that Mabuchi is beloved Murao. This argument escalates to the point where these 3 leave the scene, leaving our protagonist and Yuri alone. To top it all off, the first activity of the camp was a presentation on some leadership topics that everyone should know. However, by this point, they were all in conflict. In the evening, it's time for the group to present their opinion on the aforementioned question, but Futaba is a bit embarrassed. Mabuchi takes her sheet and presents it himself to save the entire group. During his presentation, he's interrupted by his brother, who asks him to explain what he meant. Mabuchi elaborates in great detail that the purpose of school events is for people to have fun and share, because if those experiences were good in the future, all students will remember them and cherish them for life. These words move our protagonist, as she briefly thought Mabuchi was talking about their past together. However, he clarifies that he said it because that's what she wrote, leaving Futaba quite hurt. Moments later, we see Mabuchi asking the protagonist for help with the apology letter they have to submit to their teacher. However, due to the twists of fate, they end up having a long, honest, and sincere conversation, which ends with Futaba kissing the boy on the head. Because of this, he asks the girl if she's in love with him, to which she replies that she's not, as she's actually in love with the previous Kou, not the current one. This makes the boy angry, and he leaves, telling her to stop looking for the old Kou in him because that Kou no longer exists, advising her to stop being incompetent and clinging to the past. These words make our protagonist realize that she actually loves Mabuchi and misses the old Kou with all her heart. The next day, the kids continue with their activities at the camp, this time cleaning. However, the rest of the group notices that Futaba and Mabuchi don't get along entirely well, believing that they are some sort of couple who argue about everything. In the meantime, Kominato tries to strike up a conversation with Yuri, but she looks at him for a moment and then angrily leaves the area, leaving the boy confused about why she's angry with him. Yuri decides to go clean in a place where she can be more relaxed away from this boy, but she ends up surprised when she witnesses something quite intense. She saw Murao and Yuichi having a conversation in which they talked about how they couldn't be together because a relationship between a student and a teacher is unacceptable, making their love impossible. We return to Futaba, and she continues cleaning while thinking about what to do regarding Mabuchi. After contemplating for a while, she decides to go talk to him and make things clear. Unfortunately, she ends up stumbling upon a scene that's hard for her to bear. The girl was confessing her feelings to Mabuchi, so she became aggressive and angry, grabbing the collars of two guys, thinking she was grabbing leaves from a bush. As a result, these guys try to hit on her, making our protagonist embarrassed and nervous. Luckily, Mabuchi arrives and manages to scare the guys away, inventing the lie that Futaba is his girlfriend while taking her away by the hand. This pleases the girl, and as they continue the whole way holding hands, Futaba tells Mabuchi not to let her go because she likes this gesture from him. The next morning, we see the kids have a competition, which involves completing various games to obtain keywords that they must piece together to decipher the message. The first team to do this will be the winning team. In the middle of the first game, we see that our protagonist's team was the first to win the initial keyword, as they were the only ones who managed to guess the flavors of the drinks they had. After this, their team proceeds to continue with the rest of the games, with each member going their own way, always leaving Futaba as the last. Moments later, we see that the group managed to complete all the games and obtain the keywords, which, after arranging them, they decipher to be the largest lake in the area, so they assume they should go there. But there's a problem. None of them know how to read the map, as they wandered around the camp so much that they have no idea where they are. Kamineta decides to take charge and lead the group to the lake, but to his misfortune, due to his expertise, he only ends up getting everyone lost in the middle of the forest. As a result of this, now no one knows what to do or where to go. However, after deciding where to go, they finally manage to reach a river, so they now know their location on the map. The group arrives at the river, which is full of large rocks they must step on to get to the other side. Everyone manages to cross the river, but for Futaba's bad luck, she ends up with a twisted ankle. But no one notices because she didn't want her friends to find out. In addition to this, Yuri had trouble crossing the river because she was so afraid that she couldn't move. Mabuchi came to her rescue and managed to calm her down, allowing the girl to cross without any problems. Following this, the group continues their journey in search of an exit, but suddenly, they all notice that Futaba indeed has a twisted ankle. So she has no choice but to admit it, but she still tells them not to worry because she can walk despite the minor fracture. Obviously, the others wouldn't leave her alone, so they all help her. Muriel and Yomanedo go ahead to look for the exit. Yuri holds our protagonist's backpack, and Mabuchi, who carries Futaba on his back, takes the rear. After walking for a while, it gets dark, and the group finally finds an exit, and they coincidentally find their teachers, who take them all back to the camp. Back at the camp, everyone is sleeping, and at one point, our protagonist feels thirsty, so she goes to get water. Looking out of the window, she sees that Mabuchi is outside, gazing at the sky as dawn approaches. She goes to join him. Upon arriving, Futaba strikes up a conversation with him, allowing them to understand each other's personalities a bit better. This leads to Futaba feeling so happy that she calls the rest of her friends to join her and Mabuchi to watch the sunrise, resulting in a beautiful moment for all of them. The next morning, it's time for everyone to finally return home, so we see everyone leaving except for Mabuchi and our protagonist. She tells him that she's waiting for her mom to pick her up in the car while he's waiting for her to leave. However, they try to hide their intentions. Just then, a stray cat appears, causing both of them to waste time and wait together. After Futaba's mom arrives, she says goodbye to the boy, and he quickly leaves because he doesn't want her to know that he was waiting for her. He acts indifferent. Before getting into the car, the protagonist receives a message from Yuri that leaves her stunned and speechless. Essentially, the message was a love confession, implying that Yuri is in love with Mabuchi. As a result of this, we can now see our protagonist on the train that takes her to high school, seriously pondering Yuri's message. Once she arrives, Yuri catches up with her, and they start discussing this matter. Yuri asks Futaba if she's in love with Mabuchi, to which she doesn't outright deny it, telling herself that there are plenty of guys on the planet, so she could easily find someone like Mabuchi. But just then, she runs into him at the entrance, leaving her paralyzed. After this encounter, the boy says a few things to both of them, and then leaves, leaving Yuri enchanted, which makes our protagonist appreciate how sweet and tender Yuri is when she's in love. During lunchtime, Futaba, Yuri, and Murao are eating. The latter doesn't understand why they are eating with her, to which our protagonist tells her that they are there because they want to get closer to her and try to form a nice friendship, which Murao accepts but in a cold manner. In the midst of this, Yuri starts asking Futaba about Mabuchi since they attended middle school together. Obviously, our protagonist tells her everything, but she says it in a way that makes Mabuchi look bad. Unfortunately, at that very moment, the boy happens to be passing behind her, so upon hearing all this, he starts lightly hitting Futaba, although he does it gently. Kamineta, seeing this, jumps in and, in an attempt to appear good in Murao's eyes, tells Mabuchi that it's wrong to treat a girl like that, and that he would never do such a thing to any girl. However, all of this was in vain because Mabuchi, with just a few words, manages to make the boy look. Later in physical education class, the girls are doing various exercises while the boys, as usual, are playing soccer. While doing their activities, Yuri comments to Futaba that Mabuchi looks very cute playing. She also confesses that she's always been in love with him, but that she finally sorted out her feelings on the day he helped her cross the river. This leaves our protagonist speechless because she understands that her friend is in love with Mabuchi. but she doesn't want to take him away from her, even though she is also in love with him despite denying it. At the end of the class, everyone is about to go home, but then Yuchi notifies all the student representatives that before leaving, they must submit a report on the leadership training camp. However, since Murao, Kominato, and Yuri left earlier, Mabuchi and Futaba are the only ones left to do it. So the two of them start working on the report they have to present, as well as the written apology from the other day. However, we see that the only one doing anything is Mabuchi, because Futaba is lost in thoughts about her impossible love for the boy and the harm it could cause her friend Yuri if she ends up with the boys she likes. After coming to her senses and stopping her wandering thoughts, Futaba starts working on the report. However, Yuchi arrives and he tells the two of them that since they are taking too long, it would be best to leave the report in the teacher's room, which they agree to. Before leaving, Yuchi notices that Mabuchi has something on his back, which he points out to them. It turns out to be a note that reads, "I'm a stone face," which was placed there by Kominato in an attempt to annoy Mabuchi. After Futaba removes it, the two of them have a rather intense conversation, leaving our protagonist quite embarrassed. Once the reports are ready, the two of them head out to submit them. But in an irrational thought, Futaba asks Mabuchi to go home alone, saying that she will take care of delivering the reports to the teacher's room by herself. Mabuchi accepts this, and they both go their separate ways. After delivering the reports, Futaba prepares to go home alone, but before leaving the high school, she runs into Mabuchi, which surprises her because she had specifically asked him to leave before her. In this way, the two of them go to the train station together. When they arrive to catch the train, a strange thought crosses Futaba's mind. While they were walking to the station, Futaba was seriously pondering whether to continue loving Mabuchi or not because she doesn't want to hurt Yuri with this. What she came up with was to fabricate a lie in which she told Mabuchi that she had forgotten some things back at the high school. She said this with a purpose to decide whether to continue her love for Mabuchi or give it up. If the boy gets off the train and helps her look for her things, she won't stop loving him. But if he doesn't get off and leaves without her, then she'll leave him to Yuri. To her surprise, Mabuchi got off the train and showed himself willing to help her find her things. This made Futaba make the decision her heart told her to. At the same time, she couldn't help but feel sorry for Yuri. Suddenly, Futaba started feeling unwell, nearly on the verge of passing out. So Mabuchi takes her to a bench she found to help her relax. Additionally, he buys her a bottle of water to make her feel better. Obviously, the girl drinks the water, and as the boy also gets thirsty, he asks for the bottle. Our protagonist hands it to him, thinking that if he drinks from the same bottle as her, it would be an indirect kiss. However, the boy, understanding the situation well, decides to drink by pouring the water into his mouth, but this only makes him choke. After a long conversation in which they end up looking at each other lovingly, our protagonist tells Mabuchi that she needs to go to the pharmacy to buy shampoo, to which he agrees to accompany her. The reason she wants to buy shampoo is that Mabuchi noticed her scent, but our protagonist felt embarrassed about it because she uses a cheap shampoo. As the evening approaches upon reaching the pharmacy, the boy bids farewell to Futaba while she goes inside. Once inside, she chooses the shampoo with the best fragrance and gets in line, all the while thinking about whether she should or shouldn't tell Yuri that she also likes Mabuchi. After completing her purchases, Futaba heads home, and on the way, she encounters someone familiar, none other than Yumi, her childhood best friend. At this moment, we see our protagonist explaining their relationship, recounting that Yumi was the only friend she ever had, and she used to protect and defend her from others when they teased her. But suddenly, they stop being friends for a reason that Futaba still doesn't know to this day. After this encounter, the two of them head to a local park to talk and spend some time together. Here, we finally learn why the two of them stopped being friends. It turns out that one day, Yuri went to look for Futaba to ask her if she liked the same boy as her, who happened to be 9-2. But when she found them, she saw the two of them talking while Futaba looked at the boy suspiciously. This made Yumi hate Futaba ever since and stopped talking to her. However, now in the present, Yumi met up with our protagonist to clarify this matter and apologize, which Futaba obviously accepts. Before leaving, Futaba confesses that she was never in love with Neitu, but was in love with Tanaka, the Mabuchi of that time, and that day she had gone to talk to Neitu to find out if he knew anything about Tanaka. With everything cleared up, Futaba says goodbye to Yumi and heads home, thinking that if she confesses to Yuri that she also likes Mabuchi, their friendship will end, making them enemies. The next day in class, Futaba is lost in thought because her heart tells her to tell Yuri the truth, but her mind tells her not to because it would mean losing her friendship with Yuri. In the midst of this, Futaba sees Mabuchi interacting affectionately with Yuri, which, unintentionally, makes her very jealous. Noticing that Futaba was watching him closely, Mabuchi decides to approach her and change her feelings. He hands her the report she submitted to the teacher's room the other day, which was so poorly written and full of mistakes that she needs to correct it and submit it again. Later, during lunchtime, the girls are eating, and in the middle of it, Murao and Yuri notice that Futaba has no appetite and seems quite down, so they ask if she's okay. Obviously, she lies, saying that she's fine, and since she doesn't want to waste her food, she decides to go to the cafeteria to return it. Due to this, Yuri decides to follow her and try to talk to her, knowing that she's not entirely okay. On the other hand, Futaba, after returning the bread, heads to her hiding spot in the schoolyard to ponder this delicate situation. It's here that our protagonist starts thinking and trying to vent on her own, but to her misfortune, Mabuchi arrives to interrupt the moment since it seems he wants to avoid his brother Yuichi at all costs. All of this brought them too close, which made Futaba say anything that made the boy move away. But before leaving, she tells him that Yuri was looking for her. This caused deep feelings in our protagonist as she began to recall all the lovely moments she had experienced with Yuri. So she ended up crying inconsolably, finally deciding that she would tell her friend the truth, no matter what. In the following days, we see the two girls talking. Yuri invites Futaba to a pastry shop in town, which she accepts, thinking this is the perfect opportunity to tell her all about her feelings. In this way, the two girls leave the school to head to the pastry shop. On their way out, Yuri has the idea to invite Murao, since she considers them friends, so she goes to find her, leaving Futaba alone. Because of this, our protagonist feels unsure about whether to tell Yuri the truth or not. After Yuri invited Murao, she accepted, although at first she seemed a bit cold and indifferent. At the pastry shop, the three of them meet, eat, and feel comfortable, except for our protagonist who can only think about when the right moment to tell Yuri the truth will be. Somehow or another, Futaba ends up confessing to Yuri that she also likes Mabuchi and apologizes for falling in love with the same guy. To her surprise, Yuri takes it surprisingly well, telling her that it's cute that both of them are in love with the same guy. However, during this conversation, Yuri informs the girls that she will go to the restroom. Upon returning from the restroom, Murao and Futaba notice that Yuri was crying, which they deduce from her eyes, making Futaba feel bad. As a result, Murao, in an attempt to change the atmosphere, ends up confessing that she is in love with Professor Yuichi, which surprises Futaba. But she not only surprises her with this, but also because Yuri doesn't seem affected by this news. Murao tells her that Yuri already knew this and had kept the secret well, making our protagonist understand that Yuri is a very good and loyal friend. To conclude this situation, Murao tells both of them that it doesn't make sense for them to fight over the same guy, and that it would be best for Mabuchi to decide who he wants to be with, to which both agree, closing this topic without any rivalry. Following this, all the girls head home, and as Futaba walks towards the train station, she encounters Mabuchi, who is petting the stray cat again. These two have a brief conversation as Mabuchi tells Futaba that he's going to a secret place. This leaves our protagonist uneasy, so she decides to secretly follow him. After a long journey, Mabuchi arrives and meets some guys with bad manners, so when Futaba sees this, she decides to confront Mabuchi and tells him to go home and study. This confrontation made Mabuchi's friends start fantasizing about the girl, making her feel uncomfortable, and this in turn made Mabuchi feel repulsed by these guys, so he decides to take Futaba away from there. The boy accompanies our protagonist to an alley and tells her to go in that direction, where she will find the train station while he takes another path. Upon leaving, Futaba decides to follow him because she doesn't want to leave him alone. She follows him for several minutes, which prompts Mabuchi to scold her and ask her to stop following him, to which she refuses, so Mabuchi decides to give up. Upon reaching the banks of a river, the boy buys a drink for both of them, and then they both sit on the riverbank to chat. During this conversation, Mabuchi tries to playfully scare our protagonist by attempting to steal a kiss from her, but he ends up just tapping her head, emphasizing that she should be careful the next time she comes alone to these places, as she could be a target for disturbed men. This act left Futaba with a kind of mixed feeling. On one hand, she understands that Mabuchi did this to make her understand the potential dangers of her actions. On the other hand, she feels quite sad and hopeful because she really wanted her crush to give her a kiss for the first time. In the end, she ended up crying in front of him. Days later, Futaba is in class thinking about something Mabuchi said a few days ago, which was related to the stray cat he petted last time. On that day, Futaba asked him why he didn't take the cat home with him, to which he replied that he didn't plan to because taking care of someone or a pet involves a lot of sacrifice and problems. Due to this, our protagonist leaves the classroom and goes to the hallway of the school to talk to Yuri about it. All the two of them discuss what to do about Mabuchi. Murao appears and tells them that she overheard a conversation the boy had with his brother as she was coming down the stairs. What Murao heard was that Yuichi was talking to Mabuchi about the need for him to study more and improve his grades, as otherwise he would be kicked out of the school. This prompts both Futaba and Yuri to decide to try to help Mabuchi find his way in life, as they see him as somewhat lost and believe he's neglecting his studies. Later in class, Futaba starts arguing with Mabuchi using their notebooks, meaning they would write a message on paper and show it to each other. In one of these messages, Mabuchi wrote, "The teacher is an," and unfortunately, the teacher saw it, so he had to ask Mabuchi to apologize in front of the entire class. Upon returning to his seat, the boy blames Futaba for this, something she denies because she knows it wasn't her fault. While they argue about this, Mabuchi notices that our protagonist looks different, so he points it out, to which she responds that she looks different because she's wearing makeup for the first time. This doesn't sit well with him because he thinks she looks more beautiful without makeup. Using his finger, he wipes a bit of lipstick from her lips. Unfortunately, Yuri witnesses this scene, which leaves her feeling sad and inferior to Futaba. Later, Kominato and Mabuchi leave the classroom, and on their way, they encounter two boys who turn out to be Mabuchi's former classmates from an advanced class. These two start mocking him for being so unintelligent that he got moved to a lower class, and Kominato, upon hearing this, decides to step in and defend him because he won't let them make fun of his friend. This makes Mabuchi feel protected by someone for the first time, and he feels like he has a true friend who cares about him. Later, we see Yuri sitting on a bench in the schoolyard, thinking about Mabuchi and the slim chances she has with him. Suddenly, Yuchi arrives, and the two of them start chatting. Yuchi confesses to Yuri that his brother is a strange guy because he appears cold and indifferent to everyone. But when he's with him, he becomes sensitive, just needing someone to listen to him and show him affection. This conversation between the two of them leads Yuri to send a message to Futaba asking for help to get Mabuchi back on track with his studies. In this way, Kominato, Murao, Yuri, and Futaba call Mabuchi on the phone to notify him that they will go to his house to study. However, as he was half asleep, he hangs up the call and thinks it was all a dream. To his surprise, the group arrives at his house, and since he didn't properly close the door, they enter without permission. In Mabuchi's room, the group starts studying, while he stays in bed trying to go back to sleep, but he can't because of all the noise the others are making. Due to this, he decides to get up and join them because he has no other choice. Mabuchi pays attention to what they are saying but prefers to focus on Futaba, asking her to teach him science, which she agrees to, but she gets so nervous that she doesn't know where to start. As a result of this, Yuri becomes jealous, and to prevent Mabuchi from talking only to Futaba, she asks him to bring some glasses so they can drink the juice she brought. Mabuchi obviously agrees, so he goes down to the kitchen to get the glasses. However, since Yuri doesn't want to just stand there, she decides to accompany him. In the kitchen, the two of them start cleaning the glasses they will use, and during a conversation that makes Yuri nervous, she accidentally kicks a bag of chips, so both of them start picking them up. In the midst of this, the two of them end up staring at each other for a long time. Since they are taking too long, our protagonist decides to go down as well to see why they haven't returned, and when she arrives in the kitchen, she finds both of them, but neither of them speaks to her, making her feel uneasy because of how they ignored her. This scene caused Futaba to be completely unable to concentrate when they return to Mabuchi's room to continue studying. Seconds later, Murao asks Mabuchi why he doesn't like to study, to which he replies that it's not that he doesn't like studying, but rather he sees it as unnecessary. To everyone's surprise, he suddenly shouts that he doesn't want to study anymore. This prompts both Yuri and Kominato to offer words of support to him. Eventually, Mabuchi reconsiders and decides to continue studying, but he's tired now, so he decides to leave the studying for another time, and the others respect his decision and leave his house. On the way back to their homes, Futaba asks Yuri seriously about what happened in the kitchen between her and Mabuchi. Yuri remains silent for a moment and then says that nothing happened. Clearly, our protagonist doesn't fully believe her, so after saying goodbye to everyone, she decides to run to Mabuchi's house to ask him directly about it. Upon arriving at the boy's house, he opens the door just before she does, as it seems he was about to leave. In an attempt to prevent him from escaping, she starts making up various excuses, such as saying she forgot her phone at her house or that she needed to use the bathroom. Finally, she tells him that she wants a glass of water. However, over time, the girl has drunk more than 7 glasses of water, so the boy understands that Futaba wants to tell him something and asks her directly. Our protagonist thinks seriously about whether or not to ask him about what happened with Yuri, but after a few seconds, she does. The boy, like Yuri, stays silent for a moment and then tells her that nothing happened between them. This clearly makes Futaba quite sad, but then the boy reveals the truth and the reason why Yuri didn't say anything about it. Mabuchi takes Futaba to his secret room in the house, which had an altar to his mother built by him. The girl is shocked when she sees it, just as Yuri was, so now she understands why her friend didn't tell her anything. After this, they both return to the kitchen and Futaba starts crying while apologizing to Mabuchi for thinking the worst of him and Yuri. He consoles her by stroking her hair. In addition to this, Mabuchi grabs her by the neck and seems determined to give her a passionate kiss, but their moment is ruined when Yuchi arrives. Because of this, Mabuchi quickly leaves his house saying that he started working recently. Before leaving, he asks his brother to take Futaba back to her home. On the way to our protagonist's house, she asks Kauchi why Mabuchi treats him so poorly, to which he responds with a story from the past. It turns out that when they were younger, Kauchi entrusted Mabuchi with taking care of their mother because their parents had just and they had to live in different places far from each other. When their mother fell ill, Kauchi had just become a teacher, and due to his busy schedule and the fact that he lived far away, he couldn't visit her. However, on the day he finally could visit her, he didn't have the strength to get close and see his mother, while Mabuchi was always by her side, watching her become thinner and weaker. So basically, the relationship between these two brothers is strained because they each dealt with their mothers in different ways. After hearing this story, Futaba finally begins to understand Mabuchi's personality a bit better, which, in her words, is someone who appears cold and tough on the outside, but is kind and sensitive on the inside. She gets to witness this the next day in class when Kominato gives Mabuchi some math notes. Although he doesn't need or want them, he still accepts them because he appreciates the gesture from his friend. Futaba also finds it heartwarming that Mabuchi is finally being kinder in front of his friends. Now we're presented with a flashback from Mabuchi's past. We first see that a doctor informs the boy that his mother has lung cancer in its terminal stage, so she has less than a year to live. Obviously, this news affects Mabuchi deeply, but at first he keeps it to himself and decides to act as calmly as possible, avoiding telling his mother about it. Due to this decision, the boy chooses to stay with his mother for as long as necessary, but she kindly asks him to leave as she doesn't want to waste his time any longer. He reluctantly agrees, even though he didn't want to leave her alone. While Mabuchi is on his way back home, he can't help but think that his mother will soon. When he arrives home, he starts crying uncontrollably because he had always pushed his mother aside while he was studying all day to become wealthy and famous. After this flashback, we return to the present, and we see Mabuchi waking up from a dream since what we saw were his memories. Upon waking up, he looks at the study materials in front of him, which remind him of his mother and how much he would have liked to spend more time with her. The next day at school, Mabuchi is taken to the library by his friends so that he can study. He can't refuse as he's practically forced to go. In the library, he doesn't feel very comfortable as all of his friends are paying close attention to him because they are worried about him. But he doesn't like it, so he leaves with the excuse that he needs to go to the bathroom. Time passes and Mabuchi still hasn't returned, so Murao tells the others that he escaped and went home. She deduced this because his backpack isn't with them. Futaba gets angry about this because she can't believe Mabuchi would be so ungrateful to his friends. She immediately gets up from her seat and goes to look for him. However, something goes wrong in this attempt because as Futaba is walking backward while leaving, she accidentally bumps into another student and unintentionally touches his. After all of this, the group of friends goes to a pastry shop to eat something while talking about Mabuchi's situation. They all agree that they should make plans together, like going on vacation or visiting amusement parks. However, Futaba can only think about where Mabuchi might be since he still hasn't shown up. For this reason, after finishing the conversation, Futaba quickly goes to Mabuchi's house to look for him there. However, she is surprised to find Youth Yuichi answering the door. They talk, but neither of them can find a solution to open Mabuchi's heart and make him stop pretending to be strong and cold. But since our protagonist doesn't want to sit idly by, she decides to go looking for him wherever he may be. Futaba arrives in the city center, and to her luck, she manages to find the boy, who was with his fake friends. So she decides to take him away from those bad influences. Now we see the two of them walking at night, while Futaba emphasizes that he should stop being so cold because it makes no sense to keep all the pain inside his heart. In response to this, Mabuchi tells our protagonist that she's right. There's no sense in holding on to so much pain, but he also tells her that nobody understands this pain except for him because he's the one who went through the loss of the person who gave birth to him, something that Futaba has never experienced. This causes our protagonist to get closer to Mabuchi and start his chest because she wants to enter his heart and be a part of it, but due to the boy's attitude and decisions, she can't. In the midst of this, the girl throws herself onto Mabuchi, and when they land on the grass by the riverbank, she makes some strong statements. Futaba tells Mabuchi that maybe she can't understand the pain he went through and is going through because of his mother, but both she and their friends are willing to accept him and be a part of his life because they genuinely care about him. These words manage to do the unthinkable, make Mabuchi cry for the first time and release the pain he had been holding onto for so long. All of this led Mabuchi to end up embracing our protagonist while he cries and releases all his pain. On Futaba's side, she feels happy because she finally managed to open the heart of the boy she likes. Before leaving the place, Mabuchi stays a little longer hugging the girl because he doesn't want her to see him crying. As he leaves, Mabuchi invites Futaba to dinner, which she declines, telling him that Yuichi is waiting for him at home. Then she brings up their differences and kindly asks him to try to resolve the issues with his brother, to which Mabuchi agrees to try. Later, the two return to their neighborhood, and after saying goodbye, each goes to their own home. When Mabuchi enters, he finds Yuichi, who asks if he wants to eat something he prepared. The boy doesn't say anything and leaves him alone, which makes Yuichi feel bad. Nevertheless, Mabuchi's decision changes upon hearing that their father is also at home, so he decides to join them for dinner, even though he doesn't want to because of their differences. This way, now the three of them are having a family dinner, and we see that on one side, Yuichi apologizes to his brother for leaving him alone in the face of their mother's loss, while Mabuchi apologizes to both of them for ignoring and mistreating them all the time they were apart. This, along with a few words from their father, finally allows them to mend their differences, and they continue eating and enjoying being a family. The next day in class, we see that our protagonist is waiting for Mabuchi, who arrives after a while. When he takes his seat, both of them start looking at each other and feeling embarrassed about everything they said to each other by the riverbank. In the middle of this, Kominato arrives and confronts Mabuchi about why he left him and the rest of their friends waiting in the library, to which the boy apologizes and offers another study session, leaving everyone surprised because Mabuchi has changed a lot and for the better. So we see several scenes of the group of students going back and forth, obviously studying hard and having lunch together. As the days go by, it's time for the exam results to come out, and everyone passes all their subjects with good grades, especially Mabuchi, who even outperformed his friends. Anyway, everyone passed, and they are already planning what to do during the summer vacation. But in the midst of this friend's conversation, Futaba notices a boy in the distance, the one she bumped into in the library the other day. This boy is named Tuma Kikuchi, and he is a timid and slim boy, just like Mabuchi. Tuma, noticing that the protagonist was looking at him, nervously leaves the place, leaving Futaba quite worried because she remembers what she did to him when she stumbled into him, as we recall that she accidentally touched his... Regardless, Futaba decides not to dwell on it too much and continues talking to her friends about their summer plans. Then, Futaba realizes that Mabuchi is not there, so with Yuri's help, they both go to look for him because he can't be too far away. In the end, the girls manage to find him, and the rest of their friends also arrive at their location after some time, so they start planning their summer plans properly this time. Although Mabuchi seems disinterested, as he wants to go home and make these plans from his room, his friends manage to convince him, saying that everything is better discussed in person.